Welcome everyone to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, the J.R. Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, the Tommy D. Duncan III, otherwise known as TD3. It is the first day of February 2023, Jimmy. And if it's Wednesday night,
It's definitely Black Men Speak. I want to give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button, that notification button to help our numbers out, and spread the word. Invite others to come watch the show if you like. If you enjoy the show, I'm sure other people will enjoy it also, and they'll thank you for bringing them to the show. With Tom, this is the most informative, most progressive show for information sharing on the internet for Black people.
yes, sir. Yes, sir, Jimmy, because we are not here for play.
Like Keisha Jones says, right, we're not here for play. Uh, Tom, with that being said, I know we have a lot of interesting things tonight to talk about. So why don't we jump into it?
All right, folks, we have a jam-packed show tonight.
Yeah,
We're going to be talking about a lot of different things, Jimmy. First, of course, happy Black History Month to everyone. For those who do not celebrate it throughout the year like we do, because Black History Month
that's right. It's every day.
So
you have to study Black history every day.
Yeah, for those of you who start in February, happy Black History Month to you. We will talk about one very interesting story that I just became aware of that Jimmy brought to my recognition. We're going to talk about.
Tom, before we jump into that, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I want to take this moment for a shameful plug for my wife, who's been a certified peace officer. She just passed another level course. I think whatever the second level is for peace officers. So big shout out to Carol for her accomplishment.
Well, congratulations, Miss Carol, and keep fighting the good fight.
Yes. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
So we're going to start off with our Black History Month factoid that many of you may not know. We're going to talk about the first black car company in America.
Hold on, Tom. Did you say car company?
Car company as in car manufacturing company.
Wait a minute. Some black person owned a car company. We actually made cars.
We made
cars. At the time, and nobody knew about it.
Yeah, Jimmy. And for what it's worth, we just buying cars. But this was a car company. We're also, of course, going to talk about our perspective on the Memphis Police Department beating of Tyre Nichols. Of course, the funeral was today. We're going to talk briefly about Springfield, Illinois. 2 paramedics were charged in the death of a man who, unfortunately, his loved one, his family member, called to get assistance, and he ended up dying. Then on the back end of our show, we're going to talk about something a little bit more closer to the guys' hearts, a little bit of sport, the NFL. First, Jimmy, why aren't there more black head coaches in the NFL? We're kind of heading towards the Super Bowl, but there are a lot of vacancy spots right now. And then we're going to talk about, of course, the interesting Super Bowl factoid. Of course, we have the first 2 black quarterbacks starting in a Super Bowl, Jimmy. But first, let's talk about the car company. This is our Black History fact that many of you may not be aware of, Jimmy. I'll let you kind of lead on this one first.
Yeah, so this company started off, this is a man who started off as a blacksmith apprentice. And he basically worked and learned the craft of making buggies. Then he ventured off to start his own company. Eventually, his son took over the company. And the son transformed the company into a car company. They actually made cars. In fact, Tom, from what I've read, they listed some of the features on these cars, and this was a better quality car than what Ford was putting out with the Model T. Some features that were, sort of leading the edge at the time as far as cars. I'm sure it'd be child's play now, but back then at the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, just the fact that a black person would even dare to even start a car company, Tom, or to come up with the capital or to raise the money. Now, they had a successful buggy business, so I'm pretty sure that quite a bit of the profits from the buggy business had to be used to transform them into a car company. But when they did, they were a successful car company also.
Yeah, Jim, it is very interesting. And, we want to talk about humble beginnings. The predecessor to what became the automobile or car manufacturing company, a gentleman by the name of Charles Richard Patterson, born in 1833
C.R. Richardson,
in
yes.
slavery, born in slavery and born to enslaved Africans in the United
Tom,
States.
you have to rewind that because we want to make sure we put it in the proper context. This man was born into slavery,
Yeah,
and then he eventually built a very successful, highly profitable buggy company. And then his son took the company and made it into a car company.
yeah, agreed, Jimmy. So it was born into slavery in 1833, founded a precursor to what became the C.R. Patterson and Son car company in Virginia. Built, born and raised on a plantation, ended up moving away to Greenfield, Ohio, and worked in the carriage and coachmaker company, and took what he learned there, built a partnership with a white
Yeah,
guy,
a white partner, yes.
right, by the name
He
of J.P.
bought the
Lowe.
white partner out eventually. So
Exactly.
that's how he started off with him and a white guy started the company, and eventually he bought the white partner out, and then grew the company.
Right, Jimmy. And in the early days in the buggy company, they had 10 employees. And this was, think about this, in the late 1800s, 1888, had 10 people. I mean, Jimmy, this is 2022. The large majority of black-owned companies only have one person. And
That's
that
right.
is the
Sole
proprietor.
proprietors, Tom.
Very few have multiple, but they had 10 employees back in 1888. They had, of course, a financial crisis in the late 1800s. Business got a little bit sideways, but they ended up, the son, who you mentioned earlier, actually, let's step back. First, it was one of his sons, Samuel Richardson, who took the company, but he ended up falling ill and died
Mm-hmm.
in 1899. And so the other son, who was
Moved back
named
home.
after the great orator Frederick Douglass, came back home, took over the company business, and ended up restructuring it, moving from a buggy company, which at the time they had 28 different horse-drawn carriages and buggies, from the generic brand to the doctor-driven brand.
Well, and on top of that, Tom had a number of patents for
Yes,
buggies.
yes,
Didn't realize that something as simple as having a buggy that's covered, you're able to, whip the horse or motivate the horse to move, was something that had to be patented. But they had like you said, they had these different models of buggies that you could choose from. That would show that they weren't just making buggies, Tom. They were being innovative and patenting a lot of their ideas for their innovation.
right, right. You're exactly right. And so at the turn of the century, in the early part of the 20th century, in around 1910, the son, Frederick Douglass Patterson, took over the carriage business and decided they needed to get away from the horseless carriage business, and began to restructure for being a part of the automated buggy, and or what we became known as the car business.
Right.
First, they went into car repair, and then they began to manufacture their own car repairs, selling these vehicles for somewhere between $685 to $850, which in today's term is probably close to $20,000 to $25,000, but still quite a bit of money back then.
Yes.
And of course, they estimated to have built up to 150 vehicles, which may not seem like very much now. But Jimmy, back then, you're talking about
Monumental, Tom.
exactly. That was a lot of cars back then. And of course, they transitioned going from there, from the car business to building buses and or the frames for buses to put on the chassis, Jimmy. And then the primary driver of the car business, Frederick Douglass Patterson, died in 1932, passed it on to his son, Pastel Patterson. And then, Jimmy, most of their vehicles were sold in the Ohio, Virginia, and Kentucky area. And then, of course, with the Great Depression, 1929 into the early 1930s, business obviously slowed down for all of America, so to speak. And so
Sure.
ultimately, Jimmy, the company ended up, I think, going under in around 1939 after restructuring and trying to find more money. But when you put this in context, you have to remember that this was really on the back end of the Great Depression.
Well,
But
back in the Great Depression time, and then on the precipice of the start of the war.
yeah, exactly.
So a lot of money was being sucked out of the economy by the government for the war effort, in the form of war bonds. So there just wasn't a lot of private money to keep, unless you had a government contract to build planes, tanks, or make weapons.
Exactly. But I mean, an absolute great story, something that, again, why is it that our children don't know about stories like this,
I
Jimmy?
was very shocked and surprised to come across this information, and I wish, I don't know if any of the cars have survived, but if any have,
They said in the article that I read that none of those cars have survived
oh man,
to
because
this
I would
point.
love to scrape whatever I could together, try to buy one, just so I can say I own part of history,
Mhm.
Black history.
Yeah, Jimmy. So this is I mean, again, folks, don't listen to us. Do the research for yourself. C.R. Patterson and Sons Automobile Company. This is something, things like this, thousands and thousands of stories, unfortunately, are not taught in our schools, even though they
True.
happen in America. And that is the importance of understanding, regardless of what your opinions are on critical race theory, and folks, thinking that we should have a more inclusive history taught in our schools. You have to do your research yourself, take responsibility for yourself, buy the books, build your own library, and understand that our children have a rich history in their legacy. But unfortunately, a lot of this is kept, from our communities and our families. And so we have to do the research for ourselves, Jimmy. We can't wait for somebody else to do this for us.
That is true, Tom. It also shows what you're able or capable of doing if you put your mind to it. Don't let others tell you what can't be done and place limits. Tom, I can only imagine the conversation that the father had when, first of all, when he told friends and family that he was going to buy his partner out and take the company and grow it. I'm pretty sure there are others that told him, "Man, you can't survive without that white person. Why would you want to do that?" I'm pretty sure your white partner's been good to you, and it's certainly at every stage of transforming the company from a buggy company to automobile repair to an automobile company. I'm pretty sure that there was opposition, there were the naysayers, and there were everyone telling them what they could not do, and yet they went out and did it anyway.
I would agree, Jimmy. And so, all that being said, you have someone who literally was enslaved, wasn't allowed to read, wasn't allowed to write, had no rights of their own, and they were able to build a foundation from a very successful car company, Jimmy. And so, again, understanding the foundation and the shoulders that we stand on, there is really, to your point, no excuse why we can't accomplish
Um,
anything.
that, that's
Build our
why,
own.
yeah, that's why I don't accept any more excuses, man. The more history I learn, this is sort of what's wrong when you pray for knowledge and wisdom. Because the more you learn, sometimes you wish you hadn't learned these things. Because the more that I see our ancestors doing things, makes me realize that we have so many opportunities available to us, Tom, so many more advantages than they had. Not to say we don't face some problems of our generation, but their problems were 10 times, 100 times more severe than ours. And yet we're doing one tenth of what they did.
I would agree with you, Jimmy. Absolutely would agree with you. So before we go to our next story, folks, we want to thank everybody who has joined us thus far.
Yes,
Please join us on the chat line. Feel free to express your thoughts and opinions, ask any questions that you may. Of course, we want to thank all of those who are supporting us this evening, and especially those who are in the North Texas area who may be locked into their house in the midst of all of this sleet and snow that we have got. So we thank you for joining us this evening. Please do like, subscribe, and or share this information for this show, with folks who you think would benefit from it. And of course, feel free to dial in at our number, 972-497-2280. Again, call us at 972-497-2280.
yes.
Let us know your thoughts on the stories and or the show. Now, Jimmy, of course, I think everybody in America has been talking to and or talking about what has happened in Memphis recently with the death of Tyre Nichols. Of course, the funeral was a little bit earlier today, And Jimmy, there's a lot of reconciliation because unfortunately, a lot of folks like they're feeling like they're going through George Floyd all over again.
Yeah, Tom, they may feel that way, but somehow the reaction and the response is not the same. Not that I'm encouraging protests and rioting, uh, but certainly organized peaceful protest should be um, something that is okay for this response. You know, I mean, this was a shame for this young man to be treated this way, for this to happen to him. But somehow, you know, we've seen George Floyd and Michael Brown and others seem to have gotten more attention and a greater response than this particular case. And Tom, I hate to play the race card here, but I can only wonder or speculate is if this is because this was black officers instead of a white officer. Would the response be the same if this was 5 white cops that had beat up a young black man this way?
Well, Jimmy, have we ever seen any swift response in terms of holding those accountable in that case? I just haven't seen it, Jimmy. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I just haven't seen it.
Well, I mean, I think the 5 were charged with murder. They were fired, and they were charged with murder charges. There may be some more charges for other officers that are pending, from what I hear. So we'll have to wait and see the outcome. And while we're talking about the situation, Tom, these kind of groups, specialized groups within the police force, a lot of major cities have them. And basically, these groups are designed to, I mean, let's be real about it. Their goal is, their job is to go out and harass known criminals. You know, so this is not the first time this group has beat somebody up. This may be the most severe beating that they've done, but this is not their first time doing this. This is something that's routine for specialized groups like this, and they tend to look for very athletic officers, very sizable strength officers who have some muscle, who have strength. These are not the weaklings. These are not your overweight officers on the beat who can't run. All these guys are athletic and strong, and basically kind of selected to be part of these groups to go out and find criminals and make sure that to let them know that their presence in your city is not welcome. And so a lot of the activities of these groups, Tom, these specialized police force like this, the leadership know what's going on. They know why these guys were recruited. They know why the group was put together, and they basically look the other way. And on top of that, most known criminals are not going to be down in internal affairs filing a complaint because they got beat up by one of these groups. Generally, you know, they say, hey, I don't want you dealing drugs over by this elementary school. The drug dealer just goes away, because if they don't, then the next beating may be more severe.
But the question is, I mean, you're right. So with this Scorpion team, for those of you who aren't aware of it, this was a special unit in Memphis. Scorpion stands for Street Crime Operation to Restore Peace. And so they're supposed to go out there and clean out the streets from the bad element.
They clean it out okay, Tom, yeah. Part of that cleaning up is to encourage you possibly to take your crowd someplace else and leave the city. I mean, they may not be able to arrest you for what you're doing, but if they can intimidate you and get you out of the city, that is almost as good as a conviction. It makes the city a little safer. Unfortunately, and I'm not sure how they thought this guy was a criminal, Tom. What I hear, he worked at either FedEx or one of those.
FedEx.
Okay.
He was a FedEx driver, Jimmy.
And so normally these groups, Tom, are not out doing traffic patrol. So for them to pull him over for what they thought was reckless driving,
right,
not normally something that they would be out there writing tickets. I mean, this group is not your street patrol. Like I said, they're plain clothes. They you know, and so for them to pull them over, I highly suspect that they thought he was a criminal or somebody was on their radar, maybe got on there by mistake. But it's very unfortunate because you don't want one of these groups, unless you're a criminal, but even the criminals you don't want this group coming after you because, like I said, they normally expect to get away with what they're doing. The leadership looks the other way because everyone thinks that, hey, what you're doing is a service to the city. You help keep the city safe.
And what that also means, Jimmy, is that this is not a one-off in the
No,
country.
no, it's not. No,
It,
they've done this before, Tom. If you look at the video, there was no hesitation when he ran and they caught him to do the type of kicks that they were. I mean, they were like football kicks, field goal kicks, soccer kicks. These are very hard, and to beat a person with a baton, I'm okay with the baton. I think all police forces should bring back the baton, but certainly use it in a very skillful way. And the way they beat this person, Tyree, down, Tom, there was no hesitation whatsoever. They were not even thought about it. So this lets me know that this is an automatic response, group hysteria, and that they have done this before.
well, Jimmy, this was a son, a father. This guy on the front end of his life. There's a son now without a father. You know, you have a mother who is, heart is ripped out of her chest. And this guy was someone who was, at the end of the day, doing his job, trying to get home. And so, I understand when folks talk about compliance, this guy's trying to get home. And he knows when something like this happens, it usually isn't working out for young black men. And so he's just trying to get home. He's trying to run home. And unfortunately, Jimmy, the report says that this incident where he was beat until the pulp of his life and eventually died was only 100 yards from his home. And so, Jimmy, the question that we ask about this, when we talk about the value of black life, the value of this young man's life, just trying to get home to his family, just trying to get home to his son. Okay, they mistake him for a criminal. Where is your intel? I mean, because at the end of the day, Jimmy, I mean, we've talked about several of these incidents where you think, okay, you do a potential drug bust, you have some intel on this. Where and what is the story with this guy that he literally has to be beat into an inch of his life and ends up losing his life over being stopped for erratic driving?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, the erratic driving is just an excuse to pull you over.
Right.
Like I said, these officers don't do traffic patrol.
Correct.
They wouldn't care if you were drunk driving, radical driving, ran a red light. But you have to have some reason that's subjective. And, if you have the body cam on, you can't see the person running a stop sign if they didn't. So, but radical driving is very subjective to the person who's deciding what radical driving is. Tom, what was the movie? Was it Training Day with Denzel Washington?
Yes, Training Day.
Okay. Training Day, that would probably be the closest to kind of what these officers do on this particular team. And now let's just say this. This is not just Memphis. Most major cities have these specialized teams. And their work is not advertised. You don't see these guys getting medals publicly for what they do. Secretly, they get pat on the back and promoted because the police leadership understands that sometimes you need a few guys who can operate in that gray area off the books to get things done. Sometimes, there's a minutes out there that you can't find a way to get off the streets, but maybe you can encourage them to move to a different area and exercise their craft someplace else with a little extra motivation. And not all officers are going to be willing to do this type of work, Tom, and do what these groups do. But with that being said, even the worst of criminals, Tom, would not deserve to be beaten down and killed in this manner.
Well, that's saying a whole heck of a lot coming from you, Jimmy, and I'm going to be completely honest
Well,
with
I mean, I support teams like this. If I was mayor of a city, which I hope to be one day, I would, if my city didn't have one of these teams, I would certainly encourage them to develop one.
But the question then becomes is that, Jimmy, well, the question is, where do you draw the line? Because this is absolutely unacceptable. Where do you draw the line?
Well, Tom, I mean, obviously putting strict guidelines for what level of harassment is legal. And but beating someone to death would certainly be crossing the line. Beating someone, period, would be crossing the line. But certainly going by their house to do a wellness check, if you see them riding around and driving the car, to pull them over, make sure their license is up to date and their vehicle has been inspected and they have insurance, would certainly be within. Do the things that you're legally capable of doing and direct those towards some known criminals to make their life a little uncomfortable. hopefully motivating them to possibly let them know that you're watching. Park your car out in front of their house, for instance, do your paperwork. I mean, nobody likes having the police parked in front of their house. It makes them feel very uncomfortable. So, I mean, I would be okay with these things, but certainly I would not be okay with someone being beaten in this fashion, and then, I mean, to an inch of his life, to then eventually of his life, he eventually died.
Well, the question is a fair and equitable distribution of the law to everyone, Jim. And I don't think obviously this young man, this gentleman, this father got that opportunity. He didn't get an opportunity to go back home to that night to his family, and so obviously there's going to be a lot of conversation about the George Floyd Justice Act, which is still kind of sitting there, and or other legislation at the federal or the state level to make sure that number one, we have stricter guidelines. Number two, that we hold people accountable for this, because unfortunately, Jimmy, this is absolute unnecessary violence, and unfortunately, it's disproportionately meted out in Black and brown communities. I mean, this doesn't happen in Highland Park.
It probably does, Tom. We just don't, like I said.
Well, the only time it happens in Highland Park is when somebody who doesn't look like they're in Highland Park.
Oh, yeah, that would be correct. That would be the profile part. I'm pretty sure. But like I said, most of the time when this happens to people, these people don't go file a complaint with Internal Affairs. So
Right.
they normally lick their wounds, heal, recover, and go on with their life. The other thing, Tom, and I'd be interested to follow the trial to see how much comes out of trial as far as how much of this behavior was condoned and known by the higher up in the leadership team within the police department.
Well, Jimmy, that's I mean, there is that blue code, Jimmy. So I would be very surprised if there's very much transparency in that area. But at the end of the day, Jimmy, there of course is still a lot of investigation. I think both the FBI and the Justice Department are now involved with this. They have civil rights investigations. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation is getting involved. I think 2 fire department employees have already been relieved of their duties, and 2 sheriff's offices deputies who unfortunately didn't do their job have also been relieved of their duties. And so there's still some work to be done out there, Jimmy. The question is, depending on what happens, does this really send the message to saying, look, treat everybody fairly, conduct the law? I mean, it's really their job to serve and protect, not to police communities, Jimmy. I do understand we need to keep our streets clean of the riffraff, but in situations like this, Jimmy, it's just absolutely unacceptable.
Well, Tom, I think I can appreciate your optimism. Unfortunately, I don't share any. I think what's going to happen is these teams and these groups are just going to become more careful. What will happen is you'll get selected to be on one of these teams. You'll be told, look, you need to keep this clean. You do what you have to do. Certainly, we're going to give you as much coverage as possible. But if you somehow allow yourself to get caught on body cam, to get caught on somebody's camera, if someone dies as a result of your motivation, then, we're going to have to pretend as though we didn't know about any of this. So I think the message is going to be more careful. For instance, in George Floyd case, these officers were not part of any specialized team like this. These were just street guys. These were the guys who will pull you over for a traffic violation. But in the case of these specialized teams, Tom, we very seldom ever hear about these teams. If you remove this particular situation in the movie Training Day, you would never even know that these teams exist in most cities. And so cities are not going to get rid of these teams. You don't hear anyone saying, well, we got to disband the Scorpions. No, the message would be the Scorpions and other teams like the Scorpions around the country need to be more careful.
And Jimmy, let's take it another level. The only reason we're having this conversation, the only reason that these officers are in prison right now, well, not in prison, but incarcerated right now, the only reason that they have charges filed against them is, guess what? Body cameras. because
Come on.
God
They have
forbid.
done this before with body cam. The body cams will never deter. This is why I say that they've done this before.
But Jimmy, the key is the evidence. I mean, it's basically what I'm saying is one person's word versus another. Who are you going to believe,
Right.
law enforcement, or are you going to believe, this dude over here?
Well,
And
Tom,
because of the
in
evidence,
the history of the Scorpions, it has never come down to this. They've never had a complaint filed against. I'd be willing to bet if you go look at their personnel record, they're all clean. These are
no,
exemplary officers.
they
You know,
they they
by
they've
record.
had they have had some incidents
They've
against
had.
him from what I've read. I don't know the full extent of it, but there have been some issues with him. But Jimmy, the fact that you have cameras, I mean, let's be very clear. If it were not for cameras in the public, George Floyd and everything that is
And
resulting
that was external people videoing the situation.
that's the
But
only reason. That's the only reason that we know
in
what
this
happened.
case, these officers could have turned. I mean, they knew they have body cam. They could have turned it off.
They could,
But the fact that they've done this before, the body cam never became an issue. They were never held accountable for
and
their
they
actions.
felt comfortable with the
Yes.
body.
Oh, yeah. Very comfortable doing what they do. This is what I do every day. I get up and harass people. We beat people up, leave them in the back of alleys. And I'd be willing to, this may be a stretch, but this may not even be the first person to die from what they've done. This may be the first person who died where they've actually been caught.
Mhm. Yeah, Jimmy. And talking about body cameras, we have another story. We'll probably spend a little bit less time. It's already about a little bit over halfway through our show tonight.
Yes.
But there are two paramedics in Springfield, Illinois, who've been charged with the first degree murder of a gentleman who they were supposed to be going to assist. So one guy, Peter Cadigan, and a lady, Peggy Finley, 45, appeared at a home to assist someone. The gentleman's name is Earl Moore. Obviously, he had been intoxicated and was having hallucinations, was laying on the floor, could not get up. And so it was an assistance call. And so they pulled him up. The guy could not get up. Obviously, he couldn't, control his body movement. And so the lady starts kind of, screaming and shouting at him, in essence. And the guy had been suffering from hallucinations from alcohol withdrawal. This was actually at the end of December. But they pulled this guy up. They got some assistance from the police officers who were there with body cameras on. They strapped him to the gurney face down as opposed to face up. Eventually, the man ends up dying from asphyxiation, or basically suffocating to death. On the way to the hospital, he ends up dying. Of course, the family is now filing a lawsuit, against these two paramedics and the company, of course, that they work for. And at the end of the day, Jimmy, I don't know if we would be having this conversation because of a lack of evidence. But in this case, the police officers did have body cams, and they did show the evidence because, again, it's someone who you consider to be credible.
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news in these situations.
What we got?
So going back many, many, many years ago to my law school days and taking criminal law, I'm no lawyer and I'm no expert, so I'm putting that disclaimer out there. But I do know in a murder case, one of the elements you have to prove, Tom, so the prosecutor may have did them a favor, is that you have to prove intent. So how in the world are you going to prove that these two paramedics intended to kill this person? Now, can you say they were gross negligent? Of course. You can say involuntary manslaughter. You can say manslaughter. You can make it murder 3. You can make it a lesser form of capital murder or murder where you don't have to prove intent. You can even say criminal murder. Not criminal, but felony murder. You can charge them with some other felony and then someone died in the process. You'd be easier to try to prove felony murder than you will murder 1 against them. Because with murder 1, you got to prove that they went there with the intention of killing this person. So the prosecutor may have did them a favor by overcharging.
You may be right, Jimmy, because I mean, at a minimum, it may end up being, negligent homicide, something of that nature.
I mean, you can probably get involuntary manslaughter easily.
Right.
You can say, hey, you were negligent by putting them face down rather than face up. I mean, I understand you got to secure the person, but your experience should have taught you not to do it in that fashion. But the overcharge and say murder one, knowing that you have this major element of intent that you're going to have to prove, you're going to go into court. And so I'm thinking any junior lawyer without that much trial experience should be able to beat this case, Tom, and be able to argue that the prosecution can't possibly prove their case of intent.
Jimmy, that is yet to be seen. There's probably a little bit more work to be done on this, but you may be right on this, Jimmy. But again, you have another brother who ends up losing his life. I mean, being drunk and obviously, hallucinating, so on and so forth. Probably not a situation you want to be in, but it doesn't mean that you should be put in a situation where you lose your life.
Well, that is true, Tom. And that just goes to show, man, that how precious life is. Don't take it for granted. Don't assume that the people who care that you're in are going to be always caring for you in the most professional fashion. Now, I know, was it his sister or his mother who called for assistance?
It's a good question. I know it was a family member, but it wasn't specific in this particular case as to whether
I
it was
mean,
the mother.
was there nobody else around to say or to see that he was struggling to breathe and to say, hey, something's not quite right here?
Well, this is the whole thing, Jimmy. They didn't care. That's the problem. The value
You know, I'm
of
saying the family members. Was there any family members around?
well, not but see what you have to have. I mean, you have to understand is he wasn't dead when they left in
Right.
the ambulance, and of course, the family member probably was not in the ambulance with them. What ends up happening is he ends up dying after he gets to the hospital because he suffocated because he was laid flat down on his face.
Well, I've been there, Tom. I've suffered through some congestive heart failure issues, and so I know what it's like at times when, when you have a struggle to breathe. I've been there, so that is a very outside of Tyree getting beaten to death the way he did. Suffocating is probably the second worst way to die because it's a slow process. You go into oxygen deprivation in the brain, start hallucinating. The cells in your body start exploding because of a lack of oxygen. All your organs start to fail. And yeah, Tom, it's an excruciating way to die.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Jimmy. So we definitely want to send out our prayers to the Nichols family, to the Moore family, and everyone out there who has lost a family member, but especially under unnecessary, unfortunate circumstances such as this.
But Tom, let's take something away from this experience. That if you have a family member who has to be, I don't know, call the ambulance for or the EMTs or for assistance, you make sure that you can ride with them, follow behind, to make sure that someone understands that someone cares about this person, someone's looking. Don't just assume that that they're going to care for your loved one in a way that they're supposed to, because situations like this happen. It just so happened that attention was brought to this case, but this could have easily been one of those times that he was just DOA at the hospital, and the coroner just comes along and says, "Okay, he died," and from complications, and no one's held to blame.
Yeah, you are right, Jimmy. You are absolutely right. So again, our prayers to the families of those, the Nichols family, the Moore family, and other folks out there, who we may not be talking about today, but who are still healing and attempting to somehow make sense and mend from the loss of their loved ones, Jimmy. And we've got about 20 minutes left in the show, Jimmy.
Yeah. Let's talk about these quarterbacks, Tom, or we
Um,
want to talk about the coaching.
we can talk about whichever one you want to talk about. We can talk about the coaching situation first or the quarterback situation
Well, let's
first.
talk about the coaching first, and then let's finish the show on a positive note by having two black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl.
I would agree, Jimmy. So the NFL, obviously, especially for folks in Texas or in the South in particular, which is a big football country, we got 32 teams in the NFL. And I think as of today, there are 3 black head coaches in the NFL. Out of 32 teams, set the context, 70% of the NFL is African American. Very few, less than a handful of black head coaches, not that many offensive coordinators and or defensive coordinators and or general managers who have responsibility for personnel, drafting, etc. And to play Jimmy. And, at the end of the day, everybody talks about the NFL and the shield, but this really comes down to the owners. This comes down to the billionaires who own the team. I mean, it's very easy for people to have their opinions, about the folks who are, playing on the field and talking about these are millionaires and the amount of money that they make and how they act and things of that nature. But, we're talking about the billionaires and we're talking about our community in particular. Why aren't there more black head coaches in the NFL, considering that we are 3 generations? Let me see, one, two, at least 3 generations of a significant population within the NFL who look like you and me, Jimmy. I mean, the first black head coach, Art Shell,
Yes,
was hired in the 80s. It's 2022. There's still only 2, maybe 3 black head coaches in the NFL. The Houston Texans just, I believe it was maybe yesterday or the day before, made the decision to hire D'Amico Ryans, who was the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. And so he is now the head coach of the Houston Texans after they fired one Lovie Smith after 1 year.
Tom. And so he's going to get a 2-year window.
He has a 6, and by the way, he has a 6-year agreement.
But, okay, they don't mind paying them off. I mean, these are billionaires, so they don't mind paying you a few million if they have to. What he won't get, Tom, is he won't get the Jason Garrett deal.
No, he will not get 9 years.
9 and 10 years to flip flop and lose, not produce anything and keep his job.
Underperform, for sure.
So black coaches have to hit grand slam home runs every year. I mean, it can't be on base percentage. It can't be steals. It can't be Golden Glove awards. No, you have to hit grand slams every year, Tom. And if you don't, then you make it difficult for the next guy to get a chance. So, first coach got 1 year. Tom, he didn't even get a chance to go through a draft to build a team or to put coaches that he wanted around him. He basically just there to babysit for a year and collect the paycheck. They gave him nothing. They took the talent away from him. So there was no way that he was going to produce a winning product on that field for the Houston.
And quite frankly, they did not want him to. He was, in essence, hired as a...
That is true, Tom. So that is true. And that's the nature of football, is that really the black players, fine. It took a while to even accept to open that door for the black quarterback.
Yes.
Which is now becoming acceptable. You still don't have that many black quarterbacks in the league. Despite all the other skill position that black players can dominate, you still only have a handful of starting black quarterbacks, but then even fewer coaches. But like I said, those coaches are always on the hot seat. Look at the Steelers coach. He's won a Super Bowl. Had a winning record since he's been there. And Tom, even with a winning record and going to the playoffs, there's still folks that are saying that maybe we need to get a new head coach.
Right. And he has nothing. Ben Roethlisberger, who, basically was their franchise quarterback, just retired. They're still trying to figure out. And Jimmy, with everything that they had going on, he's still figured out a way to have a winning record this year.
Yes.
We're talking about Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. You have, obviously, Todd Bowles of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, just a couple of years from winning a Super Bowl. Just a couple of years ago, that's Bruce Arians, who actually was the head coach when they won a Super Bowl, and then you have Todd Bowles when Bruce Arians, went upstairs into the booth. And then now you obviously have D'Amico Ryans, who is going to be starting his first year as a head coach. But, you look at a situation, Jimmy, like the Carolina Panthers in North Carolina. So they fired their head coach at the earlier part of this year after you went 1-4. He had a 5-11, or I think a 5-11 and 5-12 record. Goes in 1-4, gets fired. Steve Wilkes, who was an assistant, ends up taking the team over. Basically, he was a placeholder, and they end up trading the best player on the team, Christian McCaffrey. They had no quarterback.
49ers, yes.
They had no quarterback. They ended up trading the best player on the team, Christian McCaffrey, to the San Francisco 49ers. He builds and inspires the team. This is a black head coach, by the way, for those of you who may not know. They end up going 6-6 and are literally one game and some luck away from getting into the Super Bowl. That wasn't good enough. And so they did go into the coaching carousel. They did have a bunch of interviews and hired Frank Reich. By the way, the same Frank Reich who just got fired by the Indianapolis Colts
Yes.
last year.
Well, Tom, we can go back and look at what happened to Tony Dungy with Tampa. You know, you build a championship caliber team, and you get pushed out as coach. You know, because what I heard was the owner didn't like his style of coaching. Didn't like the fact that he wasn't a screaming type. He wasn't a Jimmy Johnson type, the highly emotional, highly charged, in your face, got to get this done type coach, as opposed to treating a person with respect, talking to them, trying to coach and teach them how to get better. And you build a championship team, you hand it off to another coach who wins the Super Bowl with your team. And I don't think he ever got credit for it, Tom, but this is what black coaches go through.
And at the end of the day, Jimmy, it comes down to the owners. The question is, what leverage do you have, or how do you build leverage in order to affect change in an organization? The probably behind soccer worldwide is the most valuable sporting franchise in the world, on the globe, behind soccer globally. But at the end of the day, you have a boys club of billionaires. It's like, you know what, we're going to do what we want to do. And everybody's not interested in winning a Super Bowl, but it's fun to own a team.
Well, Tom, we may have to sort of take the Dion route. Some of these coaches may have to go into the college ranks to prove themselves. The opportunities in the NFL are slow to know. And so
well, Lovie Smith did coach at the University of Illinois before he came back as an assistant at the Houston Texans, before he was basically said, hey, hold this until we find a coach that we want. There are very few black head coaches, even in D1. There are very few black head coaches in big time.
That's where the HBCUs may come and become important again.
Well, the only reason that Dion has his opportunity is because he's Dion. But you don't see other coaches from HBCU.
Well, and he did win a championship. Now, he did take his team to a championship. So he has a little bit of a proven record.
The other HBCU, you don't see 8 coaches in HBCUs getting opportunities, even with Vanderbilt. No, right. It just doesn't happen. It just does not happen.
So I don't know if there's an easy answer for that one, Tom. For the black coaches, we know that people are not going to stop going to the game. Black players are not going to give up lucrative contracts to play football in protest. So it is what it is. All we can do is speak out against it and hope that this selective fraternity of 32 billionaires.
Yeah.
Eventually turn
one woman. I think there is one woman who is a majority owner now.
And then plus, I think Green Bay is publicly traded.
Correct.
So they're owned by the public. So 30 male billionaires, one woman billionaire, and a team that's owned by the city of Green Bay. So let's hope that in time they grow to learn and understand that there are a lot of talented coaches out there that have been overlooked. And hopefully you're not overlooking them because of their color. And if they're given a chance, because, Tom, we know that there are a lot of young coaches that are being given a chance. And some of them have panned out, and some of them haven't. But there's an easy solution. If you don't pan out, then, of course, you're not going to get any more opportunities. But for the ones who have deserved at least a chance to see what they can do, you owe it to yourself and your team and your fans to give him that chance.
Well, Jimmy, you're a little bit more optimistic than I am when it comes to this subject. You and I have been probably watching football about the same amount of time. I don't think that the ownership is going to do it because it's the right thing to do. Being fair and impartial, I don't believe is going to be their motivation at
Tom,
all.
we started out with one in North Shell, and now we have three. So in 45, 50 years,
they're not going to do it because they don't want to do it. And unless you're talking a language that they understand and or money flying out of their pocket, economic embargo, there is not going to be a change unless there is a significant reduction in the economic impact of football operations as a result of it. You can forget about it.
Well, Tom, like I said, we're going to need the more success black coaches have, the more opportunities that other coaches will be given. Just like anything else, it's going to come down to performance.
Art Shell had a pretty good career.
Yes.
Tony Dungy had a pretty good career.
Yes, he did.
Mike Tomlin has had a very good career. Lovie Smith took a team to a Super Bowl. Even somebody who they just threw in, Steve Wilkes, as a placeholder, he actually built the locker room, and Jimmy took a lot of teams to the hilt and was just this close for making the playoffs. But you can get somebody, and nothing wrong with this, but Jeff Saturday, no coaching experience, an analyst. Of course, he had a Hall of Fame career with the Indianapolis Colts.
But he had no coaching experience, Tom, and pretty much he was a TV personality.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Someone rolled the dice and gave him a head coaching job.
He gets a coaching job before Eric Bieniemy. Okay, I'm just scratching my head. He gets a coaching job before Eric Bieniemy.
So,
just saying.
So, Tom, with that being said, we have a couple minutes left. So let's end the show on a high note. Yeah. Let's talk about the fact that we have a Super Bowl. I never thought we'd probably see this day in my lifetime of two black quarterbacks quarterbacking in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And Jimmy, it's I never really thought about it until it happened. I mean, just having one, which of course Doug Williams, I believe, was the very first to win a Super Bowl.
Yes.
But to have a Patrick Mahomes and a Jalen Hurts.
And just think, if he hadn't won that Super Bowl, Tom, what would that do for black quarterbacks in the NFL?
Well,
I mean, Williams opened the door for some other quarterbacks that wasn't as talented as he was, but a few got a chance. I didn't even think of the black quarterback we had, the crackhead here in Dallas. Probably wouldn't have.
Talking about Quincy Carter, Jimmy.
Yeah, probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to be quarterback here if it wasn't for Doug Williams. But so some quarterbacks did, and this is what I'm talking about. Performance, being a winner, will open doors for others. But somebody's got to step up. If you get now, black quarterbacks are looked at. They're drafted out of college. They're at least considered, not to the number that they probably should. But still, I think there are a lot of black quarterbacks who are more talented than some of the quarterbacks who get drafted above them. I'm still trying to understand the Duke quarterback being drafted in the first round by New York. I'm still scratching my head on that one. It's like, what did this guy do in college?
You're talking about Daniel Jones.
Yes, to deserve to be drafted so damn high. So Tom, we know that this happens, man. Black quarterbacks, black coaches still have to prove themselves. But the more you prove yourself, the more doors you're going to open for others that are going to come behind you. So
and in this year's draft, Jimmy, I mean, I think the two top quarterbacks that are coming out, Bryce Young, Alabama, C.J. Stroud, Ohio State.
Yes. My concern about Young, though, is his size.
Yeah, he is undersized definitely for the NFL, man. But when you talk about performance, I mean, no.
He can throw the ball now. I mean, he has good insight, makes good decisions. I'm a big Alabama fan, Saban fan. So, yeah, I like Bryce Young. I'm just concerned that he's going to be another RG3, just be undersized. Well,
as long as he doesn't have the wrong coach, like RG3 did, as long as he doesn't have the wrong
Now,
coach.
when you drafted that high, you know you're going to a pitiful team.
I understand, Jimmy, but at the end of the day, you're talking about somebody whose career was injured because of a poor coaching decision.
Yeah, so you're talking about a team that one is not going to have very much talent. They're probably not going to have a very good coach. Someone who's rebuilding. Teams that I mean, I don't know who some of the worst teams are that will be drafting pretty high, but I would imagine that.
The Chicago Bears is one of them. The Houston Texans is the other one. I think Chicago has the first pick. I believe the Houston Texans have the second pick.
Yeah, those may be the first two picks in the draft, maybe. So, so those are totally rebuilding teams, Tom.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's hope both of them much success. But congratulations to
Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes.
I hate to say it, because we hate Philly here, but congratulations to both of them.
Well, you know what? I would say this. I am not a Philadelphia Eagles fan myself, but I am a big, big fan of Jalen Hurts. He's a Texas boy.
Wait a minute, both of them are, aren't they?
Yep.
Didn't Mahomes come out of Texas Tech?
Yep. Mahomes came out of Texas Tech, kind of a second-tier program in D1. And then, of course, you had Jalen Hurts, who, Alabama. We remember what happened to him with Alabama when he was yanked from a championship game, ended up having to suck it up after losing his starting job at Alabama, transferred to the University of Oklahoma.
Which is a good move.
Exactly. Ended up coming after two number one draft quarterbacks as well. And when they came out of the NFL, they gave him no chance. They said, hey, he's a running quarterback. They'll put him in a special package, behind then Carson Wentz, who was the then starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, Jimmy. And look where he is now.
Well, Tom, but that's a testament to his ability and for the hard work he put in. But also, that was a good move to go to a coach that had a record of developing quarterbacks.
Correct.
So Stoops was probably the best. Going to Oklahoma was probably the best program he could have went to improve as a quarterback. And unfortunately, not enough people paid attention to the improvements because he certainly should have been drafted much higher and rated much higher than what he was.
Yeah, you're probably good. But the fact that he put in the work to improve himself from, the first to the second to the third year, I mean, he's like a different person out there on the field. And he was so underrated coming out, of the draft. You can't help but
part of that time was that he finished first 2 years at Alabama. You had people like Derrick Henry there, another big running back. So he didn't have to throw the ball as much. But there was a time Alabama was transitioning from being a dominant power running team to kind of being more of a passing team with some running, which is kind of where Young is now. They did a lot more passing, but that was the transition. Her kind of transition out of the program just as that transition was happening. But he went to a program with Oklahoma that had a pretty good track record of developing quarterback. And I don't think enough people paid attention to how much he improved as a quarterback. I mean, yes, he was a running quarterback at Oklahoma.
Massive improvement.
But that last year at Oklahoma, he put up some pretty good numbers. He played extremely well. And he certainly played well enough to be drafted much higher than what he was.
And Jimmy, interestingly enough, I don't think that anybody 2 years ago would have said with a straight face that he is the best quarterback in the NFC East.
I wouldn't have said it, Tom, and not because talent. I would have said it because I just hate Philadelphia.
Well, good luck to the Philadelphia Eagles. Good luck.
Good luck to both of them.
Good luck to the Kansas City Chiefs. Looking forward to a great Super Bowl. I mean, I can't even lose because I like Jalen Hurts. I like Patrick Mahomes. Big Andy Reid fan in terms of what he has meant to the NFL and giving talent an opportunity to compete and perform, because this is the same Andy Reid that when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles as the head coach gave Donovan McNabb a shot, and everybody thought he was crazy when he drafted Donovan McNabb.
Well, Tom, that's a person that's looking to win and be successful and don't care where the chips fall.
Gave Mike Vick another chance, another shot when nobody else would give Mike Vick another shot.
and so his genius is recognized on how his team performs. Because I think I was watching some videos of people analyzing this deep six, like it's a modified cover two defensive scheme that the 49ers use and some other teams are starting to use, and they were showing how the Kansas City Chiefs have figured out a way to defeat the deep six defense with ease. So, and that just goes to show the work that that team has put in, the players, and certainly a lot of that is driven by the play of the quarterback. So, I wish them both well. In situations like this time when the Cowboys are not there, I always fall on the side of the NFC over the AFC. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to cheer for the Eagles this year, although I probably won't watch the game.
Well, Jimmy, you are a sentimental kind of guy. Who would have thought?
Yeah. So anyway, Tom, we're at the top of the hour now. We're a few minutes over. So let's go ahead and let's wrap up. We didn't get any callers tonight, even though the phone number was there. The chat line was open and the phone line was open. So,
I think that narrative and dialogue must have been so good they just didn't want to interrupt.
Hey, I understand. But, we do this also because we want to hear from you.
True.
And hear what you have to say also. But we appreciate the listeners tuning in to hear what we have to say. And I hope you come away with some added motivation from the information that we share to make sure that you spend your life and make this the best life you can possibly make it. Don't allow others to place limits on what you can do. Hopefully you're motivated to go out there, start a car company, go to the moon if you want to, be a lawyer, teacher, doctor. I mean, wherever your heart takes you, know that you can do it because others have done it before you in worse situations. So if they can do it, you can certainly do it.
And we want to thank Ms. Audrey. Great topics, gentlemen. Thank you so much for supporting and listening to us this evening, Jimmy. And we want to, of course, wish everybody a great rest of the week, great weekend. And we will be back next Wednesday, Jimmy, because if it's Wednesday night,
it's Black Men Speak.
Good night, everyone.